Welcome to another Dragonfire 360 tutorial. My name is Brad, and today I'm going to show you how to do a Cartoonize effect in Blender, similar to the cartoon effect in After Effects. The video you see here is what we will achieve today. A link will be provided in the description for downloading a zip file of many different dot blends for you to examine. The video used in this tutorial is from Hollywood Camera Works, and a link will be provided for that as well. Now, just for kicks, I will show you in After Effects the same effect. This is a simple effect that is done by dropping the cartoon effect on the comp and then adjusting some settings, such as fill and edges. Edges is just that, only edges, no color. Adjusting the threshold and width for the edges can give you your desired look. Now, fill is the color portion. By adjusting the shading smoothness down, you can see that the effect is achieved by dropping the bit color depth from 16 or 8 bits to a lower setting. You can adjust the bit depth by sliding the shading steps and then smooth the result so as to avoid the stair-stepping gradient. Then adding the two effects together gives you both fill and edges. This is what we will attempt to do in Blender. Okay, getting into Blender. Delete the default cube and delete the light. Now, holding down the control key, hit the left arrow. Now this takes us to the compositing layout. Now let's load the video that we're going to use in the UV image editor for a reference. Now click Use Nodes and delete the render layer node because we won't need it. Then Shift A, Input, Add Image Node, and select your video from the drop down. Now you can also select an image sequence using this node, and just a side note, I like to use the image input node rather than the movie clip node because the image node gives you more control, such as the start and end frames and offsets. Now you do have to set your number of frames in order for this to advance with the timeline, so go ahead and do that now. In the clip I'm using, it's 189 frames. You can also adjust the end frame in the timeline to 189 as well. Also, set the current frame to about 85 or so. Now click the backdrop so we can see what we're working with, and Control-Shift-Left click the image node to add a viewer node. And in the In panel, we can adjust the scale of the backdrop. Now the first thing we want to accomplish is define the edges. We can do that by adding a color ramp. Shift A, Converter, Color Ramp. Now we're going to work with black and white, so this will in effect turn the saturation all the way down. Now let's add some color channels. We need 4, so add 2 more. Now these 2 middle ones need to be black, and the outer ones need to be white. So let's just swap the black one for the one of the middle ones. Then just change the color on the other 2. Now change the interpolation mode to cardinal. The interpolation just figures how the colors blend on the ramp from channel to channel. And now this is the look we're going for. More of a pencil sketch look. It's not quite there yet, but close. Now before I move on though, I would like to point out that if you want a sharper contrast on the edge lines, you could change the interpolation to constant and adjust the ramp to something like black, white, black, white. Just play around with it and have fun with it. Now I'll set it back to how I had it before, which is white, black, black, white, and interpolation to cardinal. Now let's soften the image a bit. Shift A, filter, dilate, erode. Set the mode to feather, and we want to set the distance to 4 and the fall off to sharp. This will give it more of a shaded pencil look. A good way to compare the image is to set our render settings to match the original video. Okay, and connect the color ramp to the composite node. Then change the window below from 3D view to UV image editor, and change the image to be shown to rendered. Now you can compare the rendered result with the viewer node result. Now the image is still not right. Some areas are way too blown out. Take for instance the girl's shirt or the tires. They should be black but are instead white. So we need to fix this. To do this, let's add another color ramp. Select the current color ramp and Shift D to duplicate it. Okay. Now connect the image to the input and Control Shift left click to connect it to a viewer node. Now delete one of the black channels and move the other black channel to the start of the ramp on the left. And as you can see, we are doing the opposite of what we did before. We are blowing out all the white portions and keeping the dark areas. Then we can mix the two images back together to get a good composite. Adjust the white channel close to the black to get a good contrast. Now let's duplicate the dilate erode node from earlier to use here. Shift D to duplicate and move it down to connect between the color ramp and the viewer node. Now change the mode to step and change the distance to 1. And now we can composite the two back together. Shift A, color, mix node, and connect the noodles to the inputs. And go ahead and change the blend mode to darken. Now it's still a little light on the shirt, so we'll add a bright contrast node. Shift A, color, bright contrast, and add this before the second color ramp. And adjust the values to about 5 on the contrast. And about 1.8 on the brightness. Now that should give us a decent result. And if you wanted to, you could render out a pencil sketch of the video right now. But we're going to go ahead and add some color to it. First, since this node setup is going to get bigger, we could group them into a Cartoonize group, or we could group the current setup as an edge group and the other as a fill group, and then put the two together in one Cartoonize group later. In fact, let's do that. Let's do the latter one. Deselect all by pushing A, and then shift select each of the nodes except the image input node and the composite and viewer nodes. Now, Control G to group them. Now, connect the noodle from the image on the group input to the color ramp node. And now over in the in panel, delete the FAC input by selecting it and clicking the X next to the name. Also delete the second image output. This is currently going to the viewer node, but we can add a viewer node inside the group if we want. Tab out of the group and then rename the label to Edge Lines in the in panel. And then rename the name to GRP Edge Lines, which stands for Group Edge Lines. Now we can finally add some color. Shift A, Color, Color Correction. Connect the noodle from the image to the input. And Control Shift left click to connect the viewer. Now let's turn up the saturation. As you can see, the colors become more brilliant. Shift A, Color, RGB Curves. We'll use the curve to posterize the image. We want a Bezier arc, so we have to use 3 points. Drag the top to just right of the center. Now drag the bottom to just left of the center. Now we use the posterized image to control the blur. Shift A, Filter, Bilateral Blur, and we will connect the noodles from the Color Correct node to the image input, and the noodle from the RGB curve to the determinator. Now what we have here is a nice soft watercolors look. And all we have to do is add back the edge lines and we're done. So let's go ahead and add a mix node. Shift A, colors, mix. And we want the colors to be dominant, so connect the blur node to the top input. Then the edge lines to the bottom. And change the blend mode to overlay, and this will give us our dark tones back. Now if you want, you could change it to darken and then lower the factor values just a little bit and get more subtle shadows. It's really up to you. Let's go ahead and add another color correction node. Shift A, colors, color correction, and add it this time after the mix node. And we'll use this to turn up the saturation again to blow out the colors a bit more, to make it more like a painting. And that should about do it. We can now clean up our nodes a bit more to organize them. So go ahead and A to deselect all, then shift select the nodes used to do the color fill, and then Control G to group them. And we'll just want to change the name and the label to color fill. Now A to deselect all, and shift select both node groups and the mix node and the color correction node, and we'll group them into a node and call it Cartoonize. So Control G for that. Now you'll have to clean up the inputs and outputs because we only need one input and one output. And now we are done. And we have a node that we can import into other projects. I want to thank you for watching. And if you have any other ideas for future tutorials, feel free to put them in the comments. I cannot guarantee anything, but it can't hurt to ask, right? So, and also as you can see here, I have included in the downloadable zip file many different dot blend files that contain variations of the cartoon effect. These are just some of the variations, so I'm going to go ahead and let them play out. A few different ones I've rendered out to see what they, some of the variations. I've got more dot blends than I rendered, so once again, I thank you for watching and you have a great day.